got tissues behind here. Thank you guys. Thank everybody for coming tonight. I'm really happy to be here. I've been crying all week getting ready for tonight, so hopefully I can just be here. And I think it was funny what Shnair said about that Fraida would be slightly embarrassed about hearing all her good qualities talked, but we get to do it. We're allowed. And I just want to say we had a bowling event last night for SHIFRA, totally unrelated to this, but I'm in town for both. And there, someone was there, sort of surprised, just somehow connected to our communications director, and then it turns out she knew Fraida, and Fraida inspired her to go to social work school. Oh. Just like right there, just like this room, we're recording this so that it can be on. We can have a recording of this event because there's a lot of people that Fraida affected that couldn't possibly fit in this room, and I'm just really happy. Fraida, I'm going to talk about her relationship with In SHIFRA's Arms and SHIFRA, but who she was. Rabbi Sachs talks about that, there's the resume, there's your professional resume, and then there's the resume that comes out when you pass away, right? And there's different qualities. You don't talk about how well somebody sells stock when they are, after they passed away. Except for Fraida, it's like her core qualities infused every aspect of her life. Who she was as a mother, who she was as a therapist, and as a student, then it was all intertwined. It was just, we got Fraida. In 2013, I put out an email on the Nefesh International listserv announcing that In SHIFRA's Arms was seeking a helpline counselor. 4 years earlier, I founded In SHIFRA's Arms, and on January 24th, I got the following email from Fraida Nathan. Dear Ms. Pelman, I was excited to see your advertisement for contract social work in SHIFRA's Arms via the Nefesh listserv. My experience as a Jewish licensed clinical social worker committed to women's mental health and well-being makes me an excellent candidate for this position for the following reasons. For over 5 years, I've worked compassionately with Jewish women from all walks of life and with various religious affiliations. As an individual therapist and a group therapist, I counsel single, married, divorced, working, homemaking, and emerging adult women. I have expertise in helping women whose problems arise from their involvement in abusive and unhealthy intimate relationships. This includes physical, emotional, verbal, financial, sexual aspects. I help women resolve their complex biopsychosocial challenges with a sensitive and holistic approach. Using a strengths perspective, I assist Jewish women to rediscover their potency, durability, and confidence in making difficult choices. I connect women to adjunct resources and refer them to appropriate organizations. And I'm working now on call as a crisis counselor, not only for Shalva, but also for friends. Let me emphasize my enthusiasm for the goals of your unique organization. Saving Jewish lives and improving the future of Jewish women has always been my passion. I consider this work sacred. So after I read this letter, I knew Fraida was the one. Even though I agreed with my board that we would interview at least 2 other applicants of the dozen who applied. I was privileged to work with Fraida for more than 9 years, including, as people have mentioned, during the last year of her life. I can never fully capture the gift it was for me to know and to work with Fraida. I cannot tell you every adventure we had while she worked from her home on West Chase Avenue and I from mine in Maryland. But tonight I'm going to give you a flavor. And B'ezrat Hashem, together you and I are going to perpetuate her extraordinary legacy through the Fraida Nathan Counseling Fund. So the mission of In SHIFRA's Arms, now SHIFRA, is to nurture pregnant women through unplanned pregnancies and empower them to build a positive future for themselves and their children. For the first several years, we tried to work with volunteers trained by social workers, but it just didn't work because it was clear we wanted to offer more than a volunteer could give, even one that was trained. And even though we weren't getting a lot of calls, we were getting them from all over the United States, from Miami, from New York, from Chicago. We actually had a very traumatic experience with a woman in Chicago who was forced into a completely unwanted abortion in this abusive situation. And we realized that we needed a professional who could guide our clients through their journey and help them discover and process what they might need if they wanted to continue the pregnancy, even in very difficult circumstances. Our organization was never meant to be political. From the beginning, we brought together compassionate people that may have differing perspectives on abortion law, but who all believed that the Jewish community has a moral obligation to offer these services to people who don't want an abortion. Interviewing Fraida in February 2013 on Skype, before FaceTime was a thing, was Mona Charon, and Rivka Mika-Sidorsky. Mona Charon is a well-known pro-life pundit in DC, strongly affiliated Jewish but not Orthodox. Rivka Sidorsky is a sex and intimacy therapist, strongly pro-choice, had interned with Planned Parenthood, and she belongs to the Orthodox community. So here it was, the three of us, trying to figure out who could we trust to be the face of in SHIFRA's arms, but really nor the voice that people were going to hear when they picked up. And I remember in the interview, Fraida sharing with her all her credentials, and we'd seen her wonderful resume and cover letter, and we just asked her, how would you approach someone who's in crisis, with these types of circumstances? And she said, basically, I know a lot of theory, but when I'm with a client, I throw it all away and I just listen deeply. And we unanimously agreed she was the one. It wasn't smooth sailing at first. The volunteer training was not enough for Fraida. She asked me if she could do a real training before she started. After all, there was a training for domestic violence, for drug rehabilitation. She wanted a roadmap. The problem was, I couldn't give her a roadmap. We were going to pioneer our approach based on her best skills and what the individual woman calling really needed in terms of emotional and financial support. Again, no one had tried to do what we were doing in the way we were doing it. This made her understandably really nervous, and this was compounded by the fact that for the first month after I hired her, we didn't get any calls. And so she was thinking she was gonna quit. And then I cried my eyes out, and not to her, to God. I said, I started this organization, and I didn't start it for my health. Who needs our help? And the next day we got a phone call. And it was an Israeli woman living in Los Angeles who was pregnant, functionally homeless, and leaving a violent fiance. She had run out of friends to stay with, and Fraida agreed to help her, and that her SHIFRA journey began. Fraida's SHIFRA journey. Fraida did an amazing job serving this woman. I'll call her Mary. We worked together to help with Mary to pay for emergency housing provided by the local Chabad, and then ultimately SHIFRA paid for her to move back to Israel before she gave birth so she could be protected from her violent ex-boyfriend. She never went back to the relationship and describes her precious son, now 10, as the best thing that ever happened to her. What a privilege. What a privilege it was to work with her and to do this level of mitzvah with her. SHIFRA grew, and we brought on her beloved Manucha to help with resources and referrals 2 years after Fraida started. 2 years after that, we brought on Fran Gutstein as a second counselor in 2017. And of course, Fran was blessed because Fran had Fraida, so she had a roadmap. My work with Fraida lasted more than 9 years, including, like we said, during her illness. I learned a great deal from Fraida, as I know really everyone in this room did, from her compassion, from her authenticity, and from her wisdom. And I want to talk about these three things. I learned a lot from Fraida's authenticity, or honesty, as other people have referred to it. It was a good balance for my idealism. It wasn't that she wasn't idealistic and I'm not authentic, but it was a balance. So I have an ideal that babies are a blessing. I have an ideal, a belief. And if someone isn't feeling that way, my intuitive way would have been to go give a pep talk. Aren't babies a blessing? And that is exactly the opposite of what people need. The women who call us needed to hear, be heard, and be validated exactly in their pain and struggle in that moment. And in fact, once that happens without an agenda, women are able to access the part of themselves that would feel a loss if they actually ended the pregnancy. And they're able to make a choice from their heart and their soul. I learned a lot from that authenticity. No pep talks, being real. I learned also from Fraida's compassion. She, everyone who knows her, I mean, when someone else was in pain, she felt their pain with them. She really did. And it was because of that that we kept developing answers, kept asking the question, what do you need? What do you need? And developing like a customized approach to meeting the needs of the women calling. Other organizations that do maybe similar work helping women with pregnancies, they may have like a package. Okay, we're gonna give you a stroller and it's good, fine. Stroller, a set of baby clothes, a crib. But the way that it developed with Fraida, it wasn't gonna be a package. It was really gonna be, what do you need? What do you need? What's gonna make the biggest difference for you in this crisis? And customizing it to that person. And so it might be a crib, but it also might be babysitting and house cleaning help. Or it might be, help to start a new career or a job or get back to work or have a date night. Whatever it was, we developed the program to be about women, about empowering the individual woman. And that was very much because it was Fraida and I and the team working together. I also learned a lot from Fraida's wisdom and knowledge. She had a very diverse set of skills to meet a very diverse group of people calling. There were people calling us who are homeowners and homeless, married and single and divorcing. Some had healthy relationships that needed guidance, and others really needed to get completely out of the relationship. The issue was really at the core emotional, and for others it was, as she would like to say, real practical. One of Fraida's most dramatic calls that she took in January of 22, her last calendar year. Yafa was strongly considering abortion. She was married with a 16-month-old. Her husband was barely making any money. I think he was making $20 an hour. She felt overwhelmed by her daughter, who was waking up very early in her home. She initially spoke to her counselor, Fran, but it became clear that what would really make the most difference for her would be Fraida working with her and her husband, because she really felt like her husband wasn't understanding what she was going through. Fraida worked with both Yafa and her husband. She created this safe space where Yafa could share her desperation and her unhappiness about being pregnant and look at what she might need if she were to continue to going forward. And one thing that it became clear, she was going to need more help around the house. She felt sick from the pregnancy, plus exhausted because her daughter was rising very, very early in the morning. Fraida worked with her and her husband committed to doing more work around the house. SHIFRA also offered to sponsor weekly household help until the baby turned 1, as well as weekly household help until the baby turned 1, and that was the real practical side. But there was also a second issue that was more abstract. Yafa felt like she was losing her identity in being a mother, and she had lost herself. And Fraida really delved into that with her. What would you need to feel like you're you? What would you need to be connected with you? And the answer was actually simple. It was she thought, if I could just have 1 hour a week where I could go to an exercise class and not with my baby, and it would be like $60 a month. So SHIFRA said, we'll pay for that. We'll cover that. And again, it was that kind of dynamic of like Fraida asking us, thing like, what do you need? What would make a difference for you? However, that week, the next week when Fraida went to meet with them, Fraida was surprised to find out that Yafa had actually changed her mind and scheduled an abortion for 2 days later. And even though she knew she could have help, and even though she knew she could have the class, and even though her husband was trying harder, she felt completely afraid and terrified about having a baby. She had serious postpartum depression and anxiety. She's just afraid of going through it again. In the session, Fraida noticed that the husband was holding back, and she asked him about it. And he said, I feel that if I really share my feelings, Yafa will feel manipulated and controlled. And Fraida had Yafa near her back and made it safe enough for Yafa to give permission for the husband to say what he really felt. And then the husband broke down crying and said, I see how much we love Leah, their daughter Leah, and enjoy her, and I'm pained to lose that. I'm scared of what we would lose. And Fraida had them mirror back and forth and facilitated them just listening to each other. At the end of the conversation, Yafa was still undecided, and she still had an abortion scheduled for the next day. An hour later, Yafa called back to let Fraida know she was keeping the baby, because she knew that her husband was going to support her, and she knew that in SHIFRA's Arms was going to be there. And a picture of that baby is on your flyer. Fraida went on to provide couples counseling and helping their marriage for the next 6 months. This was all in 2022. We kept our promises for the exercise classes and outside help, and things got much better. She did not have postpartum depression when she had her baby that July. By Fraida's last session with her in August of 2022, Yafa reported that she was joyful, that things were flowing for her, her baby, her toddler, and her husband, all strengthened by Fraida's loving care. Today, Yafa could not imagine her life without her almost 2-year-old boy. She saw that we were doing this event on Instagram, and she signed up for it to come and see this. She's glad that by telling her story, we can both honor Fraida and help other women who also are feeling as hopeless as she was that night. Tonight we are establishing the Fraida Nathan Counseling Fund. We are delighted that Mrs. Walder and the Walder Foundation have granted $100,000 over the next 3 years for this fund, focused specifically on crisis and long-term counseling to help mothers attached to their babies and to give them what they need. And additionally, for the next 2.5 weeks, Fraida's fund will be matched by generous anonymous donors. Add this all up to say between the match between the Walder Foundation and the matching, if we can raise $18,000 from family and friends, we can dedicate this year $100,000 to Fraida's fund. So I hope everyone will consider a generous gift, whether it be a one-time or a monthly pledge. And with this work, we will extend Fraida's arms into this world, continuing to do the work of nurturing and empowering women, which she treasured so deeply. May our tzedakah be an aliyah for Fraida Sima Bat Sarah. Thank you.